Welcome, everyone. It's Shift and Steer, another day. And you know what? I got to say, COVID's still happening because, but I'm seeing some really creative automotive stuff. Guys that are creating little cars and coffees of their own. And over the last weekend, I ran across a group of guys in Tustin that were I go, oh, wow, where'd you promote this? And they were like, oh, good. A bunch of us got together and made our own up, and I thought, cool. Everybody's getting creative, and that's always good. But we got a great episode today. We have Rich Waitas from MagnaFlow on, and he's going to tell us about some cool C8 development that they've been doing, and we're going to talk about SEMA's cancellation. We got all kinds of subjects to cover with this guy because he's going to get into the numbers. He's a numbers cruncher, and he's going to tell us all the details. And Aaron, where are you hanging out?
Oh, I'm just in the balcony of the Fair Parts Warehouse over here, my buddy Joe. And as you can see in the background, if you're watching, we got some fun cars back there. So they have a little barbecue today, and I have my son Finn with me. And we said, you know what? Let's go down there and do the show. I think it'll be fun and see some friends,
Cool. And for those that don't know, the Fair Parts Warehouse, that's exotic salvage, basically, right?
Yeah.
Salvage?
They've got two buildings here. This is the main workplace, and then they have the parts yard, which is like, it's a beautiful thing, but it's also tragic. It's like going to the old ruins of wartime. It's like you can appreciate the history, but it's kind of hard to see the relics as they're burned up and chewed up and in pieces,
Hey, and the only reason we get to do all this is because of our sponsors. And Matt, why don't you tell them who one of our sponsors is, please?
Yeah. A word from our friends at Geico. Did you know that right now Geico is offering an extra 15% on credit on car, motorcycle, and RV policies? That's 15% on top of the money Geico could already be saving you. So what are you waiting for? You won't find a deal like this anywhere else. Go by October 7th to geico.com to save an extra 15%. Again, that's geico.com.
Aaron, you might be able to find some Geico checks stuffed under the seats of some of those exotic cars if you look hard enough. Hey,
yeah, I'm sure they've been gone through pretty good.
Yeah,
pretty thoroughly.
Hey, we want to extend a big welcome to Rich for joining us today from MagnaFlow. How you doing, Rich?
I am good. Thanks for the invite, and a pleasure to get talking again. Albeit I kind of usually like being at the shows and the environments where we're all kind of there together, but this is the new world, right?
That's right. And
now normally at this point, you guys would probably be really gearing up for SEMA. How early do you usually get out to Vegas for a show like that? I mean, do you live there for a month ahead of time, or is everything kind of shrink wrapped and ready to go?
Well, planning starts. We usually try to get back in November and shut off and enjoy the winter and the holiday season up until New Year's. But pretty much as soon as those little quick vacations are over, Santa has delivered his gifts, and we've started the new year. SEMA planning starts January that year, and we're usually in field out at the show. I don't think I've spent a Halloween at home in 20 years. So part of the logistics crew, we're there for 2 solid weeks every year.
It's funny because SEMA planning starts at the beginning of the year, but it doesn't end before SEMA. It actually happens during SEMA. People going, my car is late, or this didn't show up, or something's broken, or whatever, right? Like there's always something happened through SEMA.
It's funny because, when I talk to all these builders, everybody says, well, how come everybody goes for that SEMA crunch? Why is it that they wait for that last minute? It's like, well, give a builder another minute. He's going to take 2. That's an opportunity to make one more change, to make one more thing bigger and better. So it doesn't matter when the date is or how far off you start planning. Whatever the due date is, we'll be there a minute late.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, that's so true, because you got to tweak that one more thing. And when you're building a car for SEMA, there's always those things. It's like any of our viewers, they, when you wash your car and there's that one little scratch that that nobody else has ever noticed. Well, when you're building a car, it's the same way. Now, normally, Shift and Steer, we work with MagnaFlow. MagnaFlow supports us at SEMA, and we have a great stage. But the problem is, Rich is so damn busy that we never get to bring him on to be on the mic. So this is a great opportunity to do it this year.
Yeah, we're always excited to have you on board. The people you bring on and the experience that you bring out to other people about the relationships that are out there has always been one of the greatest parts about participating with you, is that the personalities from everybody that you have working on the mics to the guests you bring on board, and really the insight you guys bring, because it's not just a panel to discuss a topic. We're really just, I mean, give us a beer, we'd probably be better suited, but just talking about the cool stuff that we do in the context of other people around us. So we've been a big supporter, and obviously this is an interesting opportunity, because normally I'm helping with the facilitation, but then I'm like, Tab, go, you guys know what you're doing. We'll see you at the end of SEMA.
Yeah.
You've given us lots of freedom, and we are very, very grateful. So
it's been wonderful because, Brad, as you said, MagnaFlow was the first one to step up and really start to offer the opportunity to do live podcasting as an ongoing program throughout the SEMA week, let's call it. So we do appreciate that. But now that you guys have some a little bit of time off because of the lack of sort of, because you guys have been planning to do SEMA all the way up until about a week ago, so you kind of already planned it for the year, you know. But the question is, how is MagnaFlow affected by the coronavirus? We all understand how everybody's affected by the health issues and whatever, but so let's just jump to the business side of it. What is MagnaFlow doing in this current time? It is allowing you guys to do more, or do you have to do less? Are you allowed to do more R&D on new vehicles? Like, for example, I know that you've been in the dyno and doing a lot of all sorts of testing and thermal testing and fitment for exhaust for a C8 Corvette. Do you have more time to do that now? Do you have less time to do that? How is it affecting you guys?
It's unusual. As much as I'd like to say we have more, I work still a lot on the business planning side of what it takes to keep MagnaFlow running, and obviously a lot of the logistics of people not being here at work, working from home, transitioning to other things. We're fortunate in the fact that, we're a US-based company that builds here, so I'm not worried about suppliers and materials. We only really have one material that comes from overseas primarily, and that's on our catalytic converter side, and that's the precious metals. And that industry has gone wacky, as we all know, the commodities thing from silver, gold, platinum, palladium, all of those precious metals, they're all over the board, but they all come from places outside the US, and we're kind of dependent upon that for our catalytic converter business. But as far as planning for the company, it's been a little bit of a challenge. I think everybody emotionally, in the context of our employees and the people that we work with, has to overcome all of their personal stuff. And some of that bleeds into the work, because we're all trying to figure out how to make all these ends meet. But, fortunately, we're a small family-owned company, and, the end result was take care of our people. So everybody, kept their paychecks. We just tried to figure out ways to get around things. So as much as I'd like to say I had more time to work on the cool projects and the fun stuff, a lot of it was just business management. 1 week we got directions that people are coming back. The next week they're not. We've got to do some new provisioning for the manufacturing side, because that's, we're not just a marketing and sales company. We have people here, well over 300 in our current Oceanside location, and these people work in tight parameters, and we've had to, get used to social distancing and creating work cells that work in those environments. So a lot of the things that I would say would be the fun stuff of going to the dyno and working are mitigated by the fact that we're just trying to figure out how to keep our people happy and safe.
Yeah.
Now, in that same thing, we were talking about SEMA. How does that impact your business, and what does it mean to the industry? I mean, because you're so immersed in all parts. You're out seeing builders. You're out seeing, shops. How have you seen that SEMA is going to make an impact on this, not only for MagnaFlow, but for the industry from your vision?
Well, SEMA is always an interesting part of our marketing campaign. And as really the event has shifted from what would be a traditional inside trade sales and buyer environment, it's really expanded into really a media center. And as such, we've watched as we've evolved, and we've brought in more of the things that allow us to really activate all of those media connections that we have. You know, first and foremost, we started a lot with the podcasting, as we saw that that was a means by which people were gathering information on their rides to work and such. We wanted to bring that inside and show our customers how we were engaging with our consumers at the level that, at every level we can. And specifically, you know, like the podcast event that we would host there, it's 8 years old, yet there's just now starting to show some traction where podcasting is becoming a highlighted SEMA. But also, you know, SEMA is where we go to kind of show off what we've done and who we've worked with. So having the event dissolve and as late in the market as it has, it's posed a new challenge to us to try to figure out how we're going to still go out there and talk to all these people under the careful and close microscope that is SEMA, because everybody expects things in the automotive industry to happen in November. And right now, we've been living in this kind of wild west of, well, how do you get information out to your customers? When are they expecting to see it? And couple that to the strange part of the world that we have to deal with is they're not creating new TV shows, they're not creating new movies. We have no means of getting out there other than physically through the same means we're talking right now, going out and actually communicating what it is to be a part of that community. So there's a lot of challenges on the table. You know, how do we stay relevant inside the eyes of our consumer when we're limited in bandwidth based upon the channels of distribution that they're used to gathering stuff? So we're still challenged today, obviously, with the official announcement of SEMA and canceling, on how to go out and really make use of the rest of the year in producing.
Now, what about this visual? Oh, sorry, everybody's screen froze. I thought there was a gap. How about this virtual SEMA? I mean, I've talked to a couple companies that have asked me to build some contents, and it's very hush-hush, so I don't know if anything's been organized or if it's hush-hush, but if you can talk about it, is there some sort of virtual SEMA in the planning for your company?
Well, there's a lot of things I think that have been tabled. There's quite a few discussion groups that have come up with other vendors that are like, hey, what are we going to do? And can we come together and create another virtual event? I'm still a little leery on where our positioning will be with that. I think it's going to be a challenge. I mean, we all know we go to SEMA for a week and you can't get into all the places you want to get into with all the people you want to get into. So how is it that we're going to produce that in a format that's, you know, somebody sitting at home? Because the part that scares me about some of the ideas is, well, you're going to have, what, 2,500 vendors? Let's say you give them a half hour of time out there. Are you going to sit through 1,250 hours of video content at home to see all the people that can see experiences? So I have my questions on whether or not that works, or do we fall back onto literally what we're doing now, which is you go to the groups that are the key elements and you figure out how to talk about the things that they want in the context that they want, but also in a channel that they're expecting to see it in. And that's kind of the challenge on the table today is, you know, do we try to create a quote unquote virtual SEMA replacement, or do we try to really meet the needs of what did people want when they came out of SEMA, and how do we produce that through the channels that we have available today?
Yeah, I can see. Go ahead, Aaron.
Sorry. No, I was going to say, what's the follow-up thing we used to do with SEMA? I think you guys still do it, where you go and have those little quick meetings. You know, after SEMA. Pardon?
A debriefing?
Oh, no. You know, Aaron, you're talking about the MPMC conference.
Yes.
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
So,
That's totally separate.
So I would think even something like that, where you would just do it virtual, you know, like Zoom or something, and you could see the product lines and just have something like that that's formulated more in the SEMA timeframe for companies that you want to talk to or people that you want to reach out to.
I would say for something like MPMC, you probably can, because there's a lottery and there's only a certain amount of companies, I don't know, 40 companies that can show up at a time. I think the big issue with a virtual SEMA is SEMA puts a lot of effort into how many new exhibitors are there each year, and then how do they funnel people toward or through those new exhibitor booths on their way to the meetings they would normally have. MagnaFlow is a big company, been established for a long time, so we seek out the new stuff from MagnaFlow, the new announcements, the builds they have, things like that. But what SEMA wants is, on the way to the MagnaFlow booth, I may see or swing by one or two companies I wouldn't normally do. So if everybody had a virtual SEMA, how do you draw attention to the new guys, which is, to be fair, a lot of what SEMA is about. Now, I would say, hey, for all the established companies, I'm a new parts geek, so I love the new parts hall that they have, and I love going to the companies that we work with again and again and saying what's new. MagnaFlow is in a unique position where they're there for conversations with people, and actually don't even really have product there. They have builds, they have conversations, they have their content creation. But somebody like a Holly Group that owns a billion brands, sure, virtually, I'd love to see Holly go to their headquarters, build their SEMA booth out in the parking lot, and show me a 40-minute video walking through of all the new products. That would be fantastic. But it doesn't benefit any of the new guys that would normally show up at SEMA, right? Because we don't even know to go and see those videos unless, Richard, like you said, it was 1,200 hours of video that you couldn't skip through. You'd have to really just watch the whole thing. It would just suck your life away, and you wouldn't be able to do it. So, and then the other question would be, what sort of business deals would be happening in a virtual thing? SEMA still is a trade show, and for a lot of companies, it's very, very important. They still have to sell. And would a virtual SEMA be worth their effort? I don't know if it would be. So, what we would do is what we're doing here. We go to the companies that we know and the companies that we work with, and we're getting the press releases. We're hearing about the new parts that are coming out. Again, we already mentioned C8 because we're seeing the press releases, we're seeing the social media videos, and now we have an opportunity to go, hey, Richard, why don't you come in and start telling us what's going on with MagnaFlow, right?
Another aspect along that whole lines, and it kind of touches on what you both were saying, is that there are different budgets. And where one person could put on something that's similar, let's say General Motors or Ford, they come out with their SEMA and it's this spectacular, and then MagnaFlow comes out and it's great. Then you're the guy who was going to have the 10x10 booth. Is it that it's almost like being in the darkest, dankest corner of the SEMA show, and does somebody go, oh, is this what it is? Click, and they don't get to the next.
That was a little iPhone presentation.
I mean, it's not any different than anyone who comes to SEMA for the first time. They have their booth, and they're just trying to make an impact and get their name or get it started, but people just fast forward over it. So there's so many different aspects to this that mimic true life because they can't afford a big splashy booth and lots of marketing, but it's almost easier to miss them in the electronic world because you just go click, where you don't even have a chance to walk by and wait a minute, that booth's not great, but what do they have sitting on that table there? It's interesting. It's an interesting predicament that all industries are in right now.
Yeah. Well, the one thing that SEMA has done very well with is they've made it a point that if anything is happening inside of the industry, whether it's partnerships and marketing, whether it's new product releases, whether it's just the casual walk down that you would do at a car show and something catches your eye and it forces a conversation, they've created a venue that at least gave us a destination, an opportunity, and a place that we all kind of came together for. And watching that evolve, I think, is going to be pretty interesting too, because I think this year it's forced a lot of companies to look inside to find out really how does it really work. And then because so many of these changes have instituted, and I know we can probably talk hours on the next part here, but business has gone up. People are at home stuck with their cars, looking at them every day going, oh, well, guess what? I'm still getting paid. Why don't I go out and wrench on that thing and get that thing running? So we're still seeing our customers come back and buy product.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Let's talk a little bit about product. Enough about SEMA. What's going on new? Because Richard, you and I, we caught up last week as well, and we had this conversation about cars coming from the factories, especially the aftermarket tuned cars, right? Like cars that we're seeing that we would wrench on. Anything from Honda Civic Type Rs to new Mustangs, Jeeps and supercars and and everything out there, they're getting more sophisticated. Even the pickup truck world, we're going to get into that too, but they come with tunable exhaust, and you can hit buttons on your dash. You can make them loud. You can make them quiet. You can make them programmed to start quiet in the morning and then get loud in the afternoon. Like, there's all
Once
this
you get out of your
wacky
neighborhood, they blow up, you know?
Yeah. And then Richard, in our conversation, you were talking about I think a Chevy Silverado with cylinder deactivation that can go from 8 cylinders down to 1 cylinder. And then
does that make your life more difficult?
Yeah. How do you make it sound good or sound at all? So tell us about what's going on in MagnaFlow's new products and product development. I guess specific products you guys have, and then maybe the future sort of.
So
where do you see it?
Cars are getting more expensive because we as consumers are demanding more from them. I think the day and the idea of people having multiple purpose specific vehicles is changing. I don't know how much it's shrinking or growing, but it's definitely changing, which means the demands from the consumer have changed quite a bit. It used to be you bought your pickup truck because that was your utility vehicle. If it got a scratch, ding, or a dent, it didn't matter. It was an inexpensive V8 powered, big engine, big carrying space, but it had a purpose. But that purpose is altered as now those trucks got better rides because people are like, hey, I'm spending more time in it. Hey, guess what? I also want connectivity. So I want to be able to do all this mobile stuff. And then at the same time, well, it needs to ride good on the road and be comfortable, but then it also needs to be powerful and rugged when I do go use it for the job. So as the OEMs were posed with more and more consumer demand changes, the products have gotten much more complex, specifically with regards to powertrain and exhaust. So one of the big topics that we've had to address in creating new ideas over the last couple of years have been, how do we address these differences that have come about, and how does it affect what we're building for that consumer that is either DIY, do it for me, or someone who wants to personalize that vehicle. It used to be, hey, an exhaust was simple. You took off the back part, you put a muffler on and a tailpipe. If it made slightly bigger diameter, you might have a good chance of making more power, and hopefully your product sounds good. But the days of simply slapping parts on have gone, and they've been gone for quite some time as far as being able to do validation-less testing. But really the last 5 years, as we've watched computers become so involved, you take an exhaust system off and you place an O2 sensor position or a diameter of pipe, and all of a sudden you've got a check engine light. So it changes how we've approached the product lines. And in that too, we've had to evaluate what consumers are asking from them. So people want loud exhausts that are on demand, where, I want to impress my buddies and go down to the car show, or hey, it's a track day and I'm taking my car that I do drive on occasion to work, but is kind of my weekend warrior. I want to be able to be loud or have that kind of presence when I'm out there. How do we address that? And really that's where we started looking into what the factory was doing for like bimodal or mode style exhaust, and how that's actuated, switched, whether it's mechanical, whether it's a vacuum or electric switch, or how it's managed. And more cars have them. That being said, the last part of that is, again, just the car themselves. I mean, the C8's a great example. You've got to worry about a completely new design. We've been building Corvette exhaust, if you want to take all the way back to our first generation stuff that we've offered for the classics, to where we really focused on the later models in the C5 and C6 and C7. For the most part, though, those cars are the same. They didn't offer a whole lot of other than maybe the multi-valve functioning, but you came to the C8, we really had to go backwards and start ground up. And I think that's something that we've done with our approach and engineering for all the new products we've created, is we've gone back to square one. Let's not assume that we know how to make power on this. Let's not assume we understand how this product interacts with the computer, the mechanicals, where things move. And the big thing we talked about with the C8 specifically is how it deals with heat management. We've all seen those videos of supercars, going down there and doing the burble wraps and burning down the back of the fascia because of the excessive heat. Well, those are realities inside of, that's how the car was set up stock. And catalytic converters and a lot of raw fuel equals a lot of temperature and flames. So when you have 12 feet of tubing behind the car, not as hard to manage. When you've got 3 feet of tubing behind that cat, a lot harder to manage. And that's something that the supercar world has shown us, is that mismanaging that can lead to some burn-up cars.
It's so nice to have this conversation, because that's something that so many people probably wouldn't consider. I mean, we've all seen the back of a Lamborghini catch on fire because of it wants to spit flames. But these systems are becoming so complicated and so compact, and they interweave, and the more cylinders you have to work with, the more weaving there is. And I can imagine engineering is a nightmare, especially on something so new as the C8. There's not a ton of examples out there to manipulate, right?
And it's also the only really mass-produced mid-engine car. I mean, we'll go back to the Fiara and talk about those things some other time, but there are a lot of other applications, but not nearly as technically advanced. And like I said, the C8 is specifically been a challenge. I think we were one of the first companies to get a vehicle in here. TJ Hunt literally drove it from back east to here, and then we were his first stop. He's like, I want to change the sound. And after having spent 2,500 miles in the car, it's not loud enough. So we immediately started on some experimentation, and yet we are, going on easily 8 months since the inception of the product, and we're still in testing. We've had multiple cars out to racetracks, and we're seeing that the temperatures, I mean, let's take a step back and look at the what the OEMs did. As a Corvette owner myself, this is the first Corvette that was not offered with chrome wheels. And we all know the stigma attached to Corvettes and chrome wheels, but reality, and that changed. So there really is very little on that car that requires a polished or chrome look, yet the exhaust system is left in raw stainless. And what we're finding is that's a pragmatic of what the heat differentials are. We're seeing positive temperatures in excess of 700 degrees at the racetrack at the tip, where carbon fiber that we've previously used in race cars is not going to be sufficient. It's, tearing down at 600 degrees. We've got stainless chrome flashed, where the chrome is actually coming apart and cracking and discoloring because of those temperature exposures. So there's a lot of new obstacles placed out there, where general assumption is, well, it's just an exhaust, right? Well, kind of, but it's never been placed in order where we have a mass production car who has to meet the emissions requirements of a mass produced vehicle, GM's requirement being very different than Ferrari's requirement. That cat is massive, and it's generating a ton of heat insofar that they've changed the design of their valve systems for their AFM, the advanced fuel management, which allows it to go from V4 to V8 mode for economy. But in that same sense, those valves also are exposed to all that temperature, which means if you go the traditional means of how things have been done in the past in the aftermarket, you just pop one in there, and guess what you're going to have in 6 months is a melted product. And those are the kinds of things we're seeing. We've had to go through Thermal Raceway, Sonoma, Laguna Seca, and we've had guys take the product on all their testing to find out whether or not what we're bringing to market is going to be just a piece of pretty candy that you can put on the internet and say you have, or is it truly going to be an engineered product that works for what GM has spent years in developing, which is a very good dual-purpose race stress street car, which is the C8.
So in essence, we've gone from a time when aftermarket exhausts like MagnaFlow were very simplistic in that you might have had to worry about a catalytic converter, but that was maybe diameter, maybe an O2 sensor. But now there's so many idiosyncrasies with all of the computer technology and all of the heat management and all of this, the packaging itself just to fit in with everything else. It's made these very complex, hasn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, understanding that the system has parameters that it works in, there's up to 4 valves if you have the NPP, which is the exhaust you can kind of control the sound on. The back 2 valves are to convert your sport modes to your street modes, your louder and quieter. And the first one, again, was to really mitigate exhaust flow and sound-related issues that happen when you're in 4-cylinder mode versus 8-cylinder mode. But the fact you have these 4 valves operating, one of the interesting things we did is we have an all-wheel drive coupled dyno so we can simulate real-world driving. We pulled the whole rear fascia of the car off, and we're videotaping. We got 4 GoPros out there, plus all of our, we have all of these scopes that are connected to see what the signal that's being sent from. And this is the crazy part. It's not just an actuator that's getting a signal from the computer that says open or close. They're feedback loops. So it's actually saying, yes, I'm closed, and verifying that back with the computer, and the computer is taking that into consideration. So obviously what they don't want it happening is the valve closes shut in 4-cylinder mode. You're only breathing through these little, maybe 3/8 holes, 2 of them in the valve while it's cruising around in 4-cylinder mode. And it doesn't actually open up till you hit, a certain throttle position and a certain load, and also at certain RPM and mile per hour. So all of those things happening are in the thought process of when that valve opens and closes. So in creating a sound that people want, you have to know when these things are happening. So we've literally had to map it out, put it on the dyno, and spend hours going back and watching. Okay, I'm in touring mode and I move to this mode. Here's this throttle position, and we go through an entire sweep of throttle positions to find out how it works. And couple that to the fact that now we're putting thermocouples everywhere to see where is that heat going. We've watched, like I said, it melt carbon fiber, no problem. We've watched it completely deteriorate a chrome finish on a stainless product and discolor it to a bluing. That we've entertained everything. And right now we're kind of looking at these super high temp ceramic based coatings to give you that black look to really finish off what's going on in the car. Because like I said, it's odd that GM didn't use a coated color because everything else on that car is blacked out, but they had a reason. And that was the temperature issue. So
yeah, now you know why the reason is there. But so you remember, it seemed like not that long ago, and it's probably 20 years ago, when everyone was marketing their exhaust kit based on who could make a little bit more horsepower. But I don't think horsepower is even a factor anymore. Can we even make an aftermarket kit and have horsepower can increase? It's all sound now. It's all mostly sound. And the horsepower benefit doesn't seem like it changed. Like we were getting 3 or 4 horsepower on exhaust kits, catback kits 20 years ago, and now we're getting 3 or 4 horsepower. But the difference is 3 or 4 horsepower 20 years ago was 10%. Now it's a fraction of a percent because the cars are all rolling out with 500 horsepower.
That's a good point.
and the like you're saying, Richard, the exhaust systems from the factory on most cars are incredibly complex and fairly optimized for the performance of this car. Like again, the performance cars are what we're talking about. Some of the high-end trucks, Raptors and things like that. The Mustangs, the Camaros, the C8 Corvette, they're giving you that optional. They're like, hey, when 4-cylinder mode, breathing through that little tiny tube with the valves closed, we're all about fuel efficiency at this point, and we know we're basically blocking out most of the sound, because if you heard that engine in 4-cylinder mode, it probably sounds like shit. So it's same thing with the trucks that we talked about a while ago. It's a Silverado doing 70 miles an hour on the freeway in whatever 1-cylinder mode. You don't want to hear it at all, right? You just don't want to hear it. But when you get on it, you do. So every time, every 6 months, I call Richard, I go, hey, I'm working on a project. I want it to be quieter when I'm cruising and louder when I get on it. He's like, yeah, everybody calls me.
Yeah, that's everybody, bud.
And he's like, yeah, it takes more than just a muffler swap these days to make that happen. But there isn't really a horsepower increase, right? Maybe you're getting some out of a Corvette with your exhaust.
So what it's been has been a challenge of really understanding the parameters by which the car was designed. And that means we use an OBD2 pinout to kind of understand when you're seeing short-term and long-term fuel trimming happening, to see if it's adapting to what's going on. Do we see that if it's a mass air system, that it's registering more air in because we've made the exhaust more efficient out? Those are the things we're looking for, and making sure that we don't hit thresholds, because one of the things that is common amongst the automotive aftermarket, we always say, well, hey, exhaust intake, maybe a couple bolt-ons, but now you need to get it tuned, because we've reached that threshold of where the factory tune is no longer complementary to your new design. And that's something that I would say is definitely the case today, but even more so in doing a lot of work with obviously Goldberg and a lot of the Mopar stuff out there. There's a general understanding that speed density doesn't have the adaptability of maybe a mass air system. Therefore, you don't make horsepower on exhaust. And it's one of those things where it's very possible that you can make a very efficient exhaust system that works outside the parameter of the factory calibration, and you're not going to see a benefit. And that's a challenge I think a lot of companies have run up against when they see that someone has developed something and they go, well, if they did 3-inch and they have this muffler, we're going to do our 3-inch and that muffler in a similar order, and we should have the same expectation. But without understanding how the X pipe works differently, or how the internal of the muffler might be different, you may not achieve that same goal because we're trying to create a condition that allows for a gain inside the factory parameters. So as an example, on the C8, you know, our gains are 8.5 to 10 horsepower, depending upon which car we've seen. On a car that's making nearly, you know, 500 horsepower, again, you know, that's that very small margin of, you know, 1%, 2%. Is that really something that's going to make a huge difference? Probably not. But what we are building in is the opportunity for someone to now have, with the larger diameter and the different inlet sizes, to support additional mods. And that's really where we start to see our benefits shine.
Yeah.
Is great. So we've gone up, you know, 20% in volume on the tube diameter from either, you know, a 2 3/4 to a 3-inch tube. And by doing so, the factory system and the factory calibration may only gain so much. But if you're going to put a supercharger on it, guess what? We're seeing those 20, 30 horsepower gains again as you start to approach, you know, those 600, 700 horsepower levels. So
it's all complementary.
Yeah, but I love this strategy because you guys are you're pushing it right up to the point where no tune is required. You're within those factory parameters. And then when somebody wants to do cams or ported heads or supercharger, they're going to have to tune it. So you're making it their problem.
Well, the reality is,
right? Because if you have to at that point.
Yeah. Insofar that reality exists in our newest offerings, like the XMod product you probably saw at SEMA last year.
Yeah.
We're putting in, you know, the straight pipe muffler deletes into the kit. So that guy that is looking for maximum flow and does not want to have that muffler there, or maybe wants it for the sound purposes, we're putting in the opportunity for you to kind of dial in your exhaust beyond what works as what we think is the best factory complement. So that's a big part of what we found in the consumer market that has changed, is that people's taste change. You know, either you buy the loud thing first and you're like, crap, I didn't really expect it to be that loud. It's more annoying than it is great. Or you go the other way and like, it's a little more conservative. I wanted to be a little bit more racy. So our XMod series stuff gives you the option of different sound levels with interchangeable parts that don't require you to be a mechanic or a fabricator to put in.
And at the end of the day, all of this R&D, all of this technology, it really goes back to those 3 words. Hey, Rich, I want it louder.
Yeah, right. or quieter on the freeway.
Yeah.
Talking about some of the. Go ahead, Aaron.
I was going to say the droning thing must be a real challenge too, because now you're dealing with a mid-engine car, and you're getting that sound slap from the back in a very different way than getting it from the front through the chassis and through the underside of the car. I bet on the C8 Corvette it's got to be because the muffler is left to right instead of front to back. So
yeah. Well, actually, they've done a very good job with its design, and the aftermarket design that we've incorporates the same X pipe that they have, which is a crossflow X pipe. And actually, it's not a very drony vehicle. We've actually heard a couple of our customers pull the cats off. Not supposed to be street legal, but and even without the cats, they're not drone propensity. The drone propensity is very low, which is opposite of what the case is with like bigger trucks and other things. We found that as displacement has gone down and more turbocharging has gone up, and the use of wastegates and things to make that small motor work harder, naturally aspirated until you have demand for boost, that the exhaust system is built for the boost mode, but it's way too big for it running naturally aspirated, which is why you get a lot of the drones. You have these little 1.3 liters with the turbo making 300 horsepower. When the 1.3 is naturally aspirated, in a tube that's made to support 300 horsepower, it's going to boom, and you get that low frequency note that hits your ears, and you're like, stop. But that's something we're addressing as well with our new NDT, our no drone technology, with the quarter wave resonators. And I don't know if you've seen those, but they're like the dead end chambers that are T-branched off. Yeah. So we're incorporating that in almost every product line we have today.
So Rich and I had like an hour long conversation about drone and all that stuff, and those resonators and the sine wave that goes through them. And it's very, very cool and incredibly complex about how you're doing that. You're canceling out sound waves, but to Richard's point, you're canceling out very specific sound waves, like in that small displacement turbo engine where it's starting to boom and it gives you that drone. That's the one you create that chamber for. You create that silencer, or if you will, that baffle that's canceling it out. Because then when you get higher in the RPM, it's no longer there, and it's already sounding good. So the amount of testing and R&D to get to that point is is pretty unique. We're talking about, we had a conversation about my truck, about the Lightning, and we did an exhaust on it for SEMA, and it sounds good when you get on it, but it's crazy drone when you get on the freeway now. And he's saying, yes, we can fix it, but we have to get the microphones in there and get it on the dyno and do some testing and this and that, and there's a bunch of stuff. And it wouldn't even make sense to do, because now what you guys are doing is it's so exact that if I changed the engine or swapped out the supercharger or even added a gear vendor's unit and changed my cruising RPM, it throws off all of that completely. So you really kind of need it to be done to develop from scratch those systems. So when you're developing a system for C8 and stuff, all of this is sort of taken into account. Is where's it droning in a C8 if it is droning, and how do you build an exhaust that can grow in horsepower for a supercharger or something? And it's all going to sound different. It's all going to sound a little bit different. And that's why exhaust now is all about personal preference on sound than anything else out there, right?
It's really interesting how you're picking and choosing sound waves based on the variables of the vehicle. And that's
noise
why
canceling
on these new, these new cars, because as you said, Matt, your car has too many variables, and as you change it, you add to it, those variables are going to change. But the average new Corvette, it's a package. We know what it is, so you can base it on that.
Well, Roger Demery from Kicker actually just texted me as we were talking, which reminds me, just get a louder stereo.
Yeah, I literally did that in my truck. I just hit that button, and on the freeway, I'm just like, just cranking it up. I
have a whole nother problem. My wife pulled in the parking lot the other day, and her truck, the front brake was going, and I go, Charlotte, didn't you hear that? And she goes, no, I turn on the stereo when I get in. I don't hear anything. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. She's like, I used to hear it, and it used to bother me, but I fixed that with the sound system in there.
Exactly. She goes, no, I don't notice anything. So,
Richard, you were talking about people getting vehicles, like people are getting trucks and stuff now, for example, and you're using it as their everyday vehicle. The utility of it was one thing, but getting a little scratch or a ding, I'm sure you guys have all heard the news. We talked about it. The Ram TRX is out, 707 horsepower truck. But to give you an example of that world, yes, everybody that gets them is probably want to modify them. I was doing a show with Goldberg when the car was announced. He was texting the guys at Dodge and getting his order in. Look, a TRX with pretty much all the options, and if you got on the list for one of the launch editions, it was $93,000. It's like $93,700. It is now the most expensive truck of its size in that class, right? It trumps all of the F-150s and Rams and everything out there in its size. $93,000. It's a badass truck, and it can, but for that kind of money, it needs to do everything, right? It needs to be comfortable to drive, and it needs to be quiet when it needs to be quiet. It needs to be loud when it needs to be loud. And, and you got a huge monster truck that does 0-60 in 4.5 seconds. By the way, the launch edition sold out in like 3 hours.
Yeah, it was crazy.
All the launch editions, boom, done. So it shows you the audience that's out there, because the launch edition was like, I don't know, 8,000 or 9,000, that package alone. So even if the truck started at 70,000, you're at 80,000 and change if you just got that base launch edition. But everybody's getting it seems like a nicely equipped truck is about 83 grand. And if you add the launch edition, you're about 93,000. And every one of them is sold, right? So that kind of shows you what people are thinking, going, hey, 93 grand is a lot of money, but not if I moving away from two daily vehicles to one daily vehicle.
Right.
No, Matt, it's a lot of money regardless.
It's a lot of money regardless. It's a lot of money regardless. And we love all the memes from the Dodge guys, and they sponsor the show. We love them. They're all like, everyone with the Raptors crying about blah, blah, blah. Of course, now we did the show with Edmunds, and Edmunds, they already responded on Twitter to all the people that we talked about the TRX, and they said, look, guys, here's the spy photos of the new Raptor with the GT500 engine. I love that all we hear about is electric cars and EPA, but there is that segment. We thought for a while when electric cars were coming out, we thought that the horsepower wars were going to die. And this is what we love about America is when you threaten to take something away from us, we want it more. Right? So you start threatening to take away our big horsepower vehicles, we want it more. And it's fine. There's a place for that. There's a place for C8 Corvettes and GT500s. And apparently there's a place for a GT500 powered F-150.
Well, it has gone from the pony car wars to now the big stallion wars. I mean, whoever thought it would be truck versus truck, or we'd see Jeeps with big motors and things like that.
Yeah,
and it's like, it's like now look at with the new Bronco coming out and with the Jeep,
there's a V8 Jeep out. There's a naturally aspirated
huge
V8
motor
Jeep
in the Bronco. It's right around the corner. It's already being developed.
We've always wanted these things. You go back to the 80s and the 90s, and we had our the big block 454 SS, standard cab, short bed, Silverado.
Yes.
I mean, the Lightning. That was a powerhouse truck all the way up until the 90s from Ford with the supercharged and the naturally aspirated variants. And I mean, Dodge did it before. The Viper powered Dodge. I mean, we all remember those SRT.
Yeah, the SRT 10.
Yes.
So it's been there. The want and need for those things have come always about, I think, after a reconsideration of the next power war. Because why did it come out? Well, Ford came out with a Mustang with the 5.4 with the supercharger. Why not dump it into a truck? Hey, we built the Viper. We put a V10 in it. Why not put it in a truck? I mean, I think where we are is no different than we were. I think we've just we had to go through this little speed bump, which was emissions compliance and alternative fuel, which I think that's out of our head. In the power and horsepower world, we're like, hey, we'll add it to our already internally combusted motor, but we're not getting rid of that internally combusted motor.
Right, but it's also companies like yours have been able to grow and invest in technology and invest in all the stuff you're talking about, the testing that you guys are doing, the thermal testing, sound testing, heat, horsepower, just efficiency, to be able to have. I've been down there several times. Goldberg and I've been down there. I've been down there. We've done several vehicles together, but not just your sort of, your R&D facility, your hot rod facility, but the entire manufacturing plant, the testing facility, the lab you basically have there. There's chemical engineers that are on site. They in lab coats and stuff, in clean rooms and working on these types of systems, with things that you would never expect. Yes, and they've got pen holders and stuff like that.
and things around their neck where they're constantly listening. And so how does the XMod part fall into this?
Well, really, it's the evolution of this thought process. Really, we came out to say, hey, this is how we've been building exhaust for years. It's been successful. What do we do now to that interested consumer that wants to buy the best out of the box and have all those options there? And the whole concept of XMod, meaning exchangeable modules, we came up with a modular exhaust system that has all the features built in. So, hey, you know what? Like on the Supra, we have 2 different inlet pipes. If you're going to run the car under stock power, we have our factory 3-inch lead pipe. If you know you're going to go to a big down pipe and some bigger horsepower changes, obviously the motor's derivative of the well-tuned already Z-Series BMW, we have a 3.5-inch downpipe that'll support more boost and help traverse more air. So we put that in the kit. And each XMod system is developed by platform, meaning that a way that we approach the problem for, let's use the drone, which you brought up, for a Mustang will be different than how we approach it for a Challenger. We're not using out-of-the-box solutions. We're attacking every car as a unique opportunity. And the way we designed the XMod Mustang setup with the muffler bypass and the resonator tubes out of the muffler versus the Challenger, where we have a T-pipe and a dead-end resonator tube, those were all uniquely based upon the needs and packaging of the car. So rather than looking for, I think the kind of directive is, consolidating parts and come up with a mass approach peel with mass-produced parts, we're taking all of this back to craftsmanship. V-band clamps. You know, we have a multitude of materials that we're using, whether it's carbon fiber to 304 to 409 to 436, all the different metals. We're looking at what's best for the situation and executing on what we think delivers the best resolve to that problem. It's not now just about, hey, well, having 5 metals is expensive because you're not buying the same material. Having the same muffler design for multiple cars is cost effective, but it may not produce the best result. And that's really what the XMod series is to step up into looking at a problem and approaching it to find out the best possible solution.
What vehicles? Yeah, what vehicles are available with the XMod now, and what's kind of on the docket?
Okay, currently we launched the Supra, which we've done very good with since SEMA last year. That was our first attempt, and we purposely picked a vehicle that was kind of out of our genre, because we really wanted to be uncomfortable and reapproach that customer and say, what do we have to do things right by you? We've had a great deal of success with it. We were first to market with one of the products, and we've still sold today. The next edition was the Mustang, which is one that we've been a part of from its initial inception, and really has been a big part of the MagnaFlow history is the Mustang, or the pony car segment. The Mustang specifically, this last week we just released Challenger. Charger is going to follow in the 1st of September, which will also give us some of the 300C. So we'll have all of our Mopar vehicles covered there. And then C8 will wrap up kind of our first round of Chevy, Dodge, and Ford muscle cars, with the Toyota Supra being represented on our import segment. But we plan to expand it. You know, this is going to be based upon where consumers want that best system. And as we're watching, you know, the specialization of vehicles, a 392 powered, naturally aspirated Jeep's going to have very different sound requirements now.
Yeah.
What that customer wants.
Am I wrong? Did you guys do Civic Type R?
We have a prototype in a BRZ that we also played with. It's more now matching the market to see how many people in those segments are willing to buy a product in that line. And we have done the Type R. That does have its own standalone system that uses that. It wasn't considered an XMod at first because it wasn't didn't have interchangeable mufflers, but it had all the same technologies, and that was just prior to the release of the Supra.
Okay.
Now,
and then,
I wonder how different it's going to be for the Bronco, because the Bronco has, what, 3 or 4 different powertrains, right? From 4-cylinder, probably, what, you think they'll go diesel down the road or something? So, I mean, and how do you deal with something like that too when there's multiple powertrains?
We do already. I mean, you look at the two different generation Raptors are a good example. The current twin turbo 3.5 has a very different approach to what we do for power generation and sound to what was on the old V8s. The old V8s were very easy to make them sound good. It had the traditional Ford sound of the V8, and we're just accentuating that. And it didn't have too many drone issues within the cabin. It was a well-insulated vehicle. As you start to get up to those Platinum and the SVT series Ford products, they have a ton of countermeasures, whether it's padding in the floor, to even like on the Mustang to accentuate certain sounds. We've all heard of the previous generation Mustang feeding in intake sounds to behind the dash to kind of accentuate what's going on. Down to the GT500 today actually uses active noise cancellation. The speakers are reproducing those negative sine waves to cause that abnormal sound we don't like as drone from being heard by our ears inside. So there's a lot going on.
Now, there's a lot of kits that you guys offer for the different vehicles. You know, like you said, to answer your question, Aaron, a Dodge Charger, I don't know, it's a 6-cylinder, it's an 8-cylinder, it's naturally aspirated, it's supercharged.
Thing,
You know, there's so many variations on it. Brad, you were saying?
Yeah, Rich, let's talk. I mean, Matt talked about how you have all these experts, you have all these engineers and these basically scientists that are going through every aspect of these cars. How do you translate that down to the dealer level so that when I walk into a muffler shop and say, hey, I've got my GT500 sitting out here, I want to put a MagnaFlow exhaust on it, so that they're educated and they're up to date, because this product line is always in an evolution. As you said, your R&D has to be, so your training. And I know you guys just instituted having vans go out as part of that, I think, right?
Yeah, we've had to reapproach as we've introduced a direct to market. So you can buy at magnaflow.com direct from us as an option. We have users that are just like, hey, I'd rather deal with a brick and mortar that is the manufacturer. So we've opened up the option to do business direct. that isn't our primary channel of distribution. Like you said, the going to our distribution means through the summits, the JEGs, whether it's the Keystones or whomever you're used to doing business with. We've had to create more content, and literally after I get off this call, I'm going to be filming some more. So that's been our biggest thing, is how do we get out to the market with the information? First and foremost, we got to support it digitally, which means more explanations, more in detail and in-depth content that you can find organically through searches. Say, hey, what is NDT? How does it work? What is XMod? We have to create all those videos with all that search engine optimization, but nothing changes the base fact that we just got to get out there and on the road. And since we aren't doing events, and we have staff that can do events, and we have the means with all of our support vehicles to do that, we put our salespeople back on the road to go out there and just connect. We spent a good deal of the end of Q1 into Q2 just trying to figure out how people were surviving. We had no idea where we would be today back in March. It was looking pretty grim back then when they were saying, we're just going to shut down. You couldn't do anything. So myself as well, I went out and paired off with salespeople, and we went to the muffler shops. These are the guys who see the first requests of our customer, that use the products and have to understand them more so than the guy that's just installing at home. And then part of that outreach, we go there, we tell them about what we have to offer. We ask for, of course, feedback. And really that's been the biggest thing that we found as a benefit, and being able to deal with the consumer direct in a purchasing environment. We get immediate feedback. We did close that loop. It's a little bit more difficult when you go through a distribution channel, and then they go through a jobber. When that customer is either A, happy, or B, has a question, they've got to go up 3 channels to get back to us for us to see how to improve the product, or how to answer the question if it's not inherently available through the installation guide or the training we provided. So we took a big step into getting our people back on the roads. We've divided the country up into regions, and we have people just going over and knocking on doors saying, how is MagnaFlow doing for you? And if you're an existing vendor, what can we do better? And if you're not, what can we do to make you a vendor? So it's been a big part of what we've had to do, despite what the limitations are that we have currently within the COVID process.
That's great.
Yeah,
because
interesting.
Because if I walk in and I want, you want to have that that person on the other end that is intelligent and can teach you about it, because we're all around this world all the time, but the end consumer, they just bought a car, they're enthusiastic, they want somebody that can fill them in, not just say, I don't know, this one's good though, so.
Especially with like an XMod system too, because it sounds like it can be very involved. They kind of have to be able to foresee what they're going to do in mods and such, so they don't have redundancy in their purchase. So,
well, I think
a lot of work,
man. Today is a great example of what's changed. Also, is you have these specialty tuners and guys that are doing things with certain segments of groups and cars, and I think that expertise is propagating, but it hasn't filled the void of what used to be your local parts shop. I was one of those guys. I worked at Pep Boys for many a year behind the parts counter way back in the day, but I was an ASC certified mechanic. I was also a hobbyist. So when someone came back to ask me about points of condenser and the way to set them up and on a vehicle, half the time I knew it off the top of my head, or I can give them the advice on how to go. Today we've moved to such a search year, make, model kind of format, that the person who isn't doing the direct replacement, that wants to enhance or change something, doesn't have the venue to go to. Forums are kind of a different world that's expanded and changed. Vlogs and blogs are very monetized. But the shops like you're at currently, that's a good example of someone who has expertise. If you wanted to ask anybody about how to get to a part on a Ferrari, I bet you there's a dozen people right behind you there that can tell you exactly how to do it and the right way to do it. And those people with digital and social are becoming more and more available. And I think that's what's kind of going to take the void of what used to be that professional salesperson behind the counter.
Yeah.
That's great. I think you're right. I mean, we've seen great things from the internet and very helpful, useful information at your fingertips. And then there's the guys out there that know it all, that are telling people the wrong stuff, and that's the bad thing about it. But no, that's great. I think, we're kind of coming to the top of the hour, guys. Rich, where can they find MagnaFlow online?
We're pretty easy, no matter which venue you take. If you're looking at just our website, it's www.magnaflow.com. If you're on Instagram, Facebook, it's just at @MagnaFlow. And of course, you want to bring anything to our attention, just #MagnaFlow. We try to keep it very simple.
And you also have a YouTube channel with a lot of this technical advice?
Yeah, it's still at MagnaFlow, so it's pretty easy to find. Just at MagnaFlow, you'll find all the stuff there as well.
And now, what about yourself? You've got a great Instagram. We all follow it. What about you?
Well, of course, you can see a little bit of the behind-the-scenes stuff that I get to do before it actually happens. And like I said, I'm forever going to be the auto enthusiast gearhead I am, and I always like sharing what I have when I can. You know, a lot of the stuff I get to play with. You know, the movie world. It's crazy that I've had you know, content for Fast and Furious 9, which has been delayed a year for over 2 years on the build stuff we've done there. But I'm just, you know, irking for the chance to let everybody see what it is we get to play with. So. Yeah, you can find me at Oxidizer. That's my personal Instagram where you get to see the most, or look me up under my name on Facebook at Rich Waitas, and you'll get little tidbits of the stuff I can share that I'm allowed to share, and sometimes a little more behind the scene.
You'll
I
also
apologize. I apologize. I wasn't following. I feel terrible.
If you follow Richard, because you'll also find out he's an RC car super freak.
Yeah,
super freak. He's got a room dedicated, just like shelves and walls up. He's everything you can possibly imagine, to the point where
I've been missing out.
There are MagnaFlow branded RC cars, and I think an exhaust, all because Richard Waitas has been leading the charge on all of that stuff as on the side just for fun.
And you can always tell the guys at MagnaFlow that work on those exhausts because they're in white coats, like
little,
very small.
They're very tiny, small. Those guys. They're very tiny.
RC guys.
All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. As always, we love it when we have somebody like Richard Waitas on the show with us. You can find us at shiftandsteer.com. We appreciate all the nice reviews and comments on iTunes. So, you know, please continue to do that. If you're new to the show, we'd love for you guys to do that. And you can follow me at Moderator on most social media. Guys?
Hey, guys, don't forget, we ask you to go to iTunes. You've been doing a great job of leaving some comments, giving us a 5-star rating. We've been seeing an uptick there. Thank you very much. Do that. And follow me on Instagram at Bradley_Fanshaw. How about you, Aaron?
I'm just Aaron Hagar. I'm pretty easy to find in the world. My website is theRatRunnersGarage.com. And by the way, Rich, I apologize. I'm about to blow up your Instagram. So,
hey, and everybody, don't forget that you know what? You can see us, and whether you want to or not. And we're posting those to Facebook as well as our YouTube channel. So make sure you go there. Shift and Steer on Facebook. Shift and Steer on YouTube. And Rich, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule.
It's a pleasure as always.
Thanks, guys.
Really good to see you.
Thanks, everybody. See you next week.